We have made it to the end. NFL Week 18 covers football betting contest countdown show one last time with LVC and myself. A long season. Thoughts as we head into the final Saturday-Sunday combo package that they now have for us after the usual stack of everything on Sunday. Now we get it dragged on just a little bit further in the longest season ever.
You know what? It's long and short at the same time, though. It's strange.
The most interesting comment that I think we've had on this entire show, but in our conversations on the side too, was like it was probably week 8 or 9, and we were texting, and it was along the lines of the season hasn't really even settled in yet. Like it was a weird 8 to 9 opening weeks, and then it kind of got in a little bit of a groove, and then we had that mid-December sort of derailment that's just made these final 3 weeks seem like they have gone on for months.
Yeah, as soon as the COVID stuff kicked in again, it sent it back into a tailspin as far as I'm concerned. So I just really hope that next year gets back to normal and everybody gets this virus, and now everybody gets immunity.
Oh, easy now. Well, now we're not turning into a political show on the final day here.
I don't mean it to be.
Before we get into the numbers, it's going to be. We've had a hard time with getting the top 5 the entire season. Doing this first thing on Thursday morning, we hope our reactions have provided value and at least a good discussion or discourse to anybody who's watching and has been with us all year, has been playing in the contests. This week, there's so much uncertainty, not just from the COVID perspective, which we saw sort of spread around the league a little bit more this morning with some key names going out, but also the motivation and who is ultimately going to be playing. So we're in a bit of a tough spot. Before we get into just quickly looking over the card, before we get into a very interesting survivor spot, I want to ask you about what I did last week and how you would ultimately evaluate it. For those who have been watching, I've been on the edge of the money the entire season, really, but for the last 8 or 9 weeks, I've continuously had 3 and 2 or 4 and 1s, and I've been like 1 or 2 points out of the money for the entire season, and it was 8 or 9 winning weeks in a row. And last week, as I have been all year, I went with the picks that I was making at the numbers that were available. And so the decision I had Saturday morning was going with the Packers and going with the Chargers, who were 2 very clear values in the lines that were posted Thursday morning. The Packers moved a full touchdown. The Chargers moved almost a field goal. I looked at it and said, everyone's going to be on that. I have not bet on either of those games myself. I'm going with the picks that I ultimately made, and I ended up going with Carolina, and I ended up going with the Giants. And in hindsight, those were 2 very bad-looking picks, but I'm curious, the decision I made to not go with 2 teams that got, they both were north of 1,500 picks. Right move or wrong move in that situation?
I don't see anything wrong with avoiding those picks. I know I thought Minnesota actually had a fighting chance to just show up, with the ground game. Obviously that was horrible, but going into it, I thought Minnesota might have been live because Green Bay had been playing 1-score games and hanging on by a thread in recent games. So anytime you can avoid it being on a game that everybody else is going to be on, I think that's a benefit.
The interesting thing that kind of gives me like a little bit of solace in the decision I made was, had I selected those 2 and ultimately gone 4 and 1, I still would have not made it inside of the money because there were so many other people in that position as well as behind me that also went 4-1 or 5-0. So even if I picked up 4 points and got to a very high number, I still would have been in the exact same spot I was in. And when it comes to those games hitting, like, you're just not making up ground in this contest, period, plain and simple.
Well, and see, here's the issue. You run into 2 issues over the last couple of weeks of the season, and that is the people that are out in front, if they're not playing to win and they're just trying to preserve, well, they're certainly going to be on those picks. And both of those picks were very hard to not take. When I was putting in my selections, I put Green Bay in one of them. I think. But all these people ahead of you are going to play those games. So you really, it kind of forces you to take different games, because the only way you're going to gain, it doesn't do you any good to keep up. You have to gain. So, and then that falls in line with my other pet peeve is I wish every one of these games were on half points. It really makes it hard to, I know last week there was a push, wasn't there, on one of the games? I know I pushed a game. So, that prevents movement up and down when you've got these solid numbers. So, I mean, if you're really playing to win and you want to gain ground, you're in one of those 8 games this week with half points, no matter how slight the margin is that it's going, or the odds are that it's going to land on a full point, because it's not all that often. But nevertheless, you need every little bit of edge you can to gain points.
A mutual acquaintance, perhaps a friend of yours, or someone you know well, had a tweet this morning about how when he won the contest, he finished with 53 points, which now in this year's edition of the Circa Million would not even get you inside of the money. Obviously, there's another week to go, but it wouldn't have had you in that spot either a week ago. You, with the 2 checks behind you, obviously very successful when it comes to playing contests in and around Las Vegas, found yourself in a very good spot last year. But even those point totals that you put up last year, which were incredibly impressive, where were those ranking now after last week relative to what the contest is at?
I think my second place finish would be around 11th or 12th this year. You know what? I don't have the list of the standings in front of me, but it wasn't in the top 10. It was just outside the top 10.
So even at the top of the contest with the more entrants, that top 5 score from just a year ago is already starting to move down the leaderboard. I mean, we were north of 4,000 entries this year. If this gets up north of 6,000 next year, I mean, it's going to take a incredible season to ultimately finish inside the money at the rate that everyone continuously improves. And obviously the bigger pool, the more chance you have to finish up at the top. But this is getting to be probably the most difficult contest to money in on the planet, is it not?
Yeah, I mean, and it's frustrating too, because it only takes, 1 or 2 bad weeks, and boy, you're just not going to make it back. You can't fight this. Just natural variance. The people that impress me are not the people that win. It's the people that are up there, every year. And there are a handful of people that did well last year that are doing well this year. And I think that that's very impressive.
Absolutely. You were in a spot similar to what a lot of people are going to experience this week a year ago, where you knew that one more week and you were going to have a very big payday, and you were probably getting some money regardless based on how well you were doing with 2 entries inside the top 10. One I know was you were finishing off on a heater. You won, 15 of the last 16, or you had an incredible streak with 1 entry. What was it like a year ago going into this final week for you, knowing the potential that could have come from just one more good Sunday?
I was just listening to a podcast with Alan Boston yesterday, and he mentioned something that actually fit where I was last year perfectly. Something to the effect of where, when you're in the zone, you're in the zone, and you just know you're in the zone. And that was the case for me last year. And I just knew I was in the zone. It was a lot easier. The stress came from that the pay lines dropped so hard and so fast because they wanted that $1 million payday at the top. And it was very possible that I'm sitting there second, third place, that I could fall into like a $10,000 range. I mean, it was very reasonable. So, but I actually said to myself, I'm playing to win, and I did my best to avoid games that other people were on. And I did perfectly against the other 8 in the top 10, but I matched 3 with the guy in front of me. And that's what hurt my ability to overcome him. And he played strangely the whole year, and that's why it was tough to get a read on him. but it was easier to get a read on everybody else that was surrounding me and avoid. But I didn't care. I mean, I put my picks in and I'm playing to win, and I go, you know what? I've done well all year long. There's no way I'm going to go 0-5 or 1-4 here. I have to press. I have to play to win. And I took a couple of games I normally wouldn't have just because I knew I had to be on different games.
Right.
But I'll tell you one thing. I wasn't nervous at all. In the very first time the entire year, I didn't think about the money. I didn't think about anything. The first time I got nervous was after I pressed send. And I had nothing left. The season's over. And I realized I got like some goosebumps. I'm like, holy cow, there's nothing, everything else is out of my control. That's it. It's over. I can't change anything, nothing to do. And that's when I started to get a little nervous because I no longer had any control. I always felt like if I lost a game or I gained a game, I'm in control over picks the following week. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but that was the range of emotions that I experienced.
Dead Money Media, who's been with us the entire season, says he moved up 50 positions with the 5-0 week. I would have liked that 5-0 week. He's inside the top 33 now, 55, 29-1, incredible season, 55.5 points. So he's about a point ahead of the cutoff at 50th place, which is going to make for a very interesting Sunday. Wishing him the best. He's had a fantastic year all along, has been following us. One last question for you on last season. Did you do any hedging out, or did you take any positions against any of the contest plays, or did you just let it go?
Oh, yeah. Well, that was the beautiful thing about it was the game ended with that Philadelphia-Washington game. So Washington was -2 in the contest. And believe it or not, I didn't even realize I had a chance for the fourth quarter. I was just going through all the plausibilities of where my money situation was going to be, because that Washington line was up to 5.5, then it went to 6, and then it went to 6.5. And I'm like, okay, well, how much is, what is the range of place that I can finish after those early games went off? I'm like, okay, well, this is the worst I can finish because I listed all the other contestants. And this is the worst I can finish. This is the best I can finish. So if this, and this happens, it's going to cost me X amount. So I got to hedge this much. And then I realized, well, wait a minute. I can win that fourth quarter too. So that was a shock.
That's when you realized you could win the fourth quarter.
Yeah. Well, that was the other entry that ended up finishing 5th, because that was an afterthought for most of the year. Because it was I came back from the 2800s on that one, but I didn't realize I had been running that great on it, and I never thought about a quarter. So then I had to do all those calculations on top of it. So, but I got a +7 on the Washington, or in the Philadelphia, for the hedge, and that obviously dead nut middle on top of it. So that was really nice extra payday.
Amazing. It's just the amount of things that can change after that early slate of games is very interesting. And as we'll get to in Survivor, I think it's interesting this year in just a second when we look at KC. But before we go there, we've been trying to pick the top 5 consensus games all season long. It has been, as I mentioned, a grind, to say it lightly. This year, honestly, to some extent, we may be doing a disservice trying to speculate this early, but to me, there's maybe a couple games that are like clear standouts because we still may ultimately get news, but I think half of these are going to be 2 to 3 points off by the time we get to Saturday afternoon as is. But I wanted to just get your thoughts on a couple of games that we're looking at. The first one would be Washington at 7 with the Giants, and all of the stuff that has come out about the players no longer listening to Joe Judge, the issues within the locker room, a team that's looked like they've just completely quit, but then also the possibilities that there's a lot of people looking towards the Packers as Matt LaFleur continuously insists that he is going to play his guys despite Green Bay catching the 1 seed. That was a game before they clinched, was north of Green Bay -11. So if those starters do play, you have to think that's a number that's going to go way up. What's your take there on either of those two sides?
I don't think we can have a take at this point. I think a lot of these games, we have to just wait because
You just don't know.
you just don't know, and it just leaks out. It just leaks out, and I don't remember, but I kind of remember last season one of the coaches saying that they were going to play everybody, and he folded like a paper napkin on it and changed his mind before game day. At least one team did it last year, so
Yep.
I think you just have to wait to the last possible moment.
The only other thing I would say on that note is for those that may be a step slow on the news or anything, in terms of teams we've heard about, Kansas City's obviously going to play everyone with the 1 seed still in reach for them. Andy Reid has a history of sitting guys. That won't be the case on Saturday. The other
line's up to 11.5 as we speak. It's lit up in red.
Yeah, and it's going to keep going up. The Tampa Bay game against Carolina, the Buccaneers were 16.5-point favorites before the Packers clinched the 1 seed. And to me, that was the number that reflected probably the full health and full effort of Tampa Bay on the field. And this line the entire week, it's barely moved an inch, but everyone's basically sitting in the middle of where it would be if it's like a half effort. But if all of those guys were to sit, Brady, the remaining pieces of the offense, that's going to be a game that probably goes less than a field goal. But if they were to play, I would suspect that 8 is going to trend back towards like a 13 or a 14. And so that, I think, as just a game that, depending on the news and how early we ultimately hear it, could be a very popular side with people betting Tampa Bay if those guys tend to go. And that's maybe an obvious thing to say with the movement that could come, but that would be sort of the game that I would have circled as someone watching this show to keep an eye on who's ultimately going to be in out.
Yeah, I agree. Boy, is that a stressful selection in Survivor this week. I'd be nervous with that Tampa.
Well, here's the good segue over to Survivor, because to me this week, from what we're doing, this is the more relevant and interesting conversation to have. And I'm sure people watching here have Survivor pools or office pools of their own that they're in. But when it comes to the big one here with Circa, the guys in the back at Circa, Derek, Jeffrey, Mike, I mean, they have to be loving this because they put in the bonus for Kansas City and Tampa Bay, saving them until the final week. And it just so shakes down that we have 3 people of the final 5 with Kansas City or Tampa Bay remaining. And it's a bit of an intriguing situation because there's the $1 million bonus. So you would have to suspect with both teams, especially Kansas City, like there's no question that both of those guys are going to be going with Kansas City with that bonus money on the table. But then what do you do if you're Return of Survivor and you have Tampa Bay sitting there with the bonus, but you might get into a spot where they sit everybody and your final pick, as well as the bonus, is coming down to Tampa Bay with backups against the hopeless Carolina team. What do you see shaking down here with this matrix on the screen?
Oh, I just realized I've been reading the chart wrong. The X's mean that they can't use them, right?
It's the inverse. The X
okay.
means it's already been selected.
Right. So we've got 2 that can use Kansas City. They're certainly going to use
there. They're both using KC, right?
Yeah.
So that takes out 2 of the 5. But the interesting thing here is that game got moved to Saturday. So in a way, it puts the other 3 contestants, in my opinion, at a bit of it sort of does them a disservice because not only are they going to take it and have the potential for the undefeated season and you get the bonus money, but should KC win, you know where one of the other picks is going to go. So that's really 3 of the 5 in the contest settled. You have the option now for a full Sunday where you're kind of hedging out against 2 other picks that might ultimately burn you.
Yeah, it's going to be awfully interesting to see how this plays out. It hasn't excited me most of the season up until this point because this is the nitty gritty. We're going to see. It looks like we're going to have multiple winners here, probably.
So let's put you in the shoes of Chris Piper or the Syracuse Hawkeyes. You don't have the decision to look at KC. You don't have the decision to look at Tampa Bay. You don't have Buffalo available as the big favorite. You no longer have Indianapolis as the big favorite. And only one of the two has Tennessee, which is the other double-digit favorite on the board. So that's probably, you would have to think, where Syracuse Hawkeyes is going to go. But if you're Chris Piper at the top there, how are you ultimately going to this week, and how are you handling this?
Boy, is that tough. That's tough.
Because, I mean, Cincinnati was probably appealing, but now Burrow's sitting. The rest of the offense is sitting. And you're kind of going down the list here. Atlanta's a dog at the Saints. Carolina is a big dog at the Buccaneers. Cincinnati with the backups is a dog to Cleveland. The Lions are a dog. Houston's a 10-point dog with the Titans playing them to win the 1 seed. The Jags are 16-point dogs. The Raiders are 3-point dogs at the Chargers on Sunday night. Saints, again, a 4-point dog. Giants, 7-point dog. The Jets, a 16-point dog. The Steelers, a 6-point dog. The Seattle Seahawks, a 7-point dog to Arizona. And then you have the Washington football team, a 7-point favorite against the Giants. So the only team that he has favored is the Washington football team. So do you go that direction, or do you go Raiders, and then you know what everybody else has done in the contest? You play the last game, and then you try and move some money around to hedge.
Well, I think the decision involves his capability of access to credit and betting hedgings too.
Sure.
Because you'd want to be the last one left in that situation.
Because at least you know that, again, three of the other four are going to go KC or Tampa, and it just really comes down to, does the guy at the bottom of Syracuse Hawkeyes, does he go Tennessee? I did say the Saints were a dog. They're a 4.5-point favorite, so he does have that option if he wants to fade Atlanta. But like, if you're in his shoes, if it was me, I would go Raiders late, so I know what everybody else did, and then I know how to handle it on my side from a hedging potential. I mean, I'd be in Las Vegas, and I would have you on speed dial to potentially have some access to funds to maneuver. But I don't know if he has that luxury. But there's a few ways that that's an interesting spot to be in for him. I think he's the most interesting of the five, don't you?
Yeah. I think that's going to be really interesting to see what he comes up with, and it is a shame that you have to turn in the picks before the. What time is that Kansas City game? That's a night game, but it's just a shame that the games are kind of staggered there. But it's also a bonus potentially. He's got some difficult decisions.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, and so I think as we're looking at this, we're going to see 2 picks on KC. We're going to see 1 pick on Tampa, and I would and then, like, okay, so let's play this another way, right? So you're Syracuse Hawkeyes. You have Tennessee sitting there. So the picks have to be submitted Saturday afternoon. So let's say you're him and you go, okay, Tennessee, 11-point favorite. Kansas City loses. Now, Cincinnati would have to beat Cleveland. They've announced that everyone's sitting, but Cincinnati could win that game and then force Tennessee out of the 1 seed. But you could look at a situation where, if you're him, you pick Tennessee before the Chiefs game. Kansas City loses, which almost ensures the Titans get the 1 seed. That may lead to them ultimately resting guys in a situation where they normally wouldn't. And all of a sudden, that 10-point favorite you took could be much closer to a pick-em.
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. I mean, it's realistically, though, his number one way to hedge, he's kind of forced into Washington because he can hedge with plus 270 on the Giants. I mean, what's your better hedge option?
There's not one out there. And that's it's going to be really interesting to see the tally come up on the Circa Sports account with the 5 picks. Last week, all these guys make it through. But this week, I mean, it's as interesting of a survivor spot with that $1 million bonus. And it's impressive to see that you've gone this far without using those teams. But it's amazing how much just that one more incentive added into the contest has made this such an interesting finish down the stretch.
It is. There's no doubt. It's an interesting twist. I wouldn't have intentionally preserved those teams to try to chase this, but it makes a difference now at the end.
Big time. So that, I think, wraps it up for us. An NFL season in the books, 18 weeks, the longest season ever. Any parting words before we send everybody off for the final week and into the postseason?
It's I've been in touch with or observed a lot of people just stressing out. It's only Thursday. I can't recommend enough, especially this week of all weeks, is don't be stressing out about your picks today. There's so much information that's still due to be out, and the constant regurgitation in your brain, it really only works against you. I firmly believe looking at this stuff fresh on Saturday morning is the best bet for those that submit on Saturday. Wait as long as you really need to, because you just think too much and there's just too much interference and you get predisposition. Okay, I finally got 2 of these. I just got to come up with 3. And then you get married into games that you might not want to be married into in the long run. And then that becomes disruptive at the last minute. Oh, now I thought I had this one and now I don't. And it just causes disruptions.
I'm with you. And it's something that now, without the Thursday night football game, obviously you don't even have that in your mind. So why not wait till the last second, especially in a week like this where you can get all the info, and that kind of makes a lot of decisions for you, I think, or at least helps you get much closer to those games. For LVC, I'm Adam Chernoff. We're going to have to get you on. It Covers Daily, a new show for us, starts next Monday. We're going to be daily streaming all the way through the playoffs. We're going to have to steal a few minutes of your time to talk some of these playoff games, maybe even get you on for a halftime live as we do every primetime game or standalone game from now until the end of the season. I know you've probably got some travel plans and some time off plans coming up, but we might try steal you a few more minutes of your time before we get to the end of the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I got travel plans to the supermarket and back.
We'll leave it at that. For everyone that's followed along all season, thank you very much for watching. Thanks to Brady and Mick behind the scenes who have given us the platform and all the fancy graphics and tickers all season long as well. He's LVC. I'm Adam Chernoff. For one last time this season, this was the Covers Football Betting Contest Countdown. Good luck with your final week of picks, and we'll talk to you Monday morning on Covers Daily.